capital budgeting, independent project versus mutually exclusive project, NPV, net present value, and IRR, internal rate of return. And the key formulas would be the formulas for net present value NPV, which is equal to the discounted value of all the future cash flows of the firm or the project, discounted at the appropriate discount rate R. And also the formula for internal rate of return, IRR, is when we set the NPV as 0, then the return is called IRR. Okay, so we're gonna learn in detail how we can calculate NPV and IRR and how to use these two measures to make capital budgeting decisions for independent projects and also mutually exclusive projects. Okay, so let's first look at the concept of capital budgeting, which is the analysis of potential additions to fixed assets. Okay, so when we're trying to make decisions about whether we want to spend money to buy some fixed assets, we will have to estimate the value of this project, or whether we can whether the future associated income would cover our initial cost to purchase this fixed assets, to see if it's worth it to buy it. Steps to capital budgeting. Step 1, estimate cash flows, inflows and outflows. So usually we would have initial cash outflow as our initial cost, and then during the project we would have future potential inflows after we make the purchase. Step 2, assess riskiness of cash flows and determine the appropriate cost of capital. Okay, so we will have to assess the risk level of the project, and that determines our expected rate of return or cost of capital, R, as our discount rate. Step 3, we will use our discount rate to discount all the cash flows to find net present value, NPV, or IRR. Step 4, we will accept the project if NPV is larger than 0, which means we will make profits. Or IRR is larger than WACC, which means the return is larger than the cost. Okay, so we will have examples of to carry out these steps to make decisions on the projects. And when we are looking at the projects, they could be independent, which means the cash flows of one project are unaffected by the acceptance of the other. So we can make independent decisions on each project if multiple projects are independent projects from each other. In the other case, if the projects are mutually exclusive projects, which means a set of projects where only one can be accepted, then we cannot make independent decisions anymore. We will have to choose the project with the highest NPV or the highest IRR. And the NPV has to be positive and IRR has to be larger than WACC. Okay, so when we're making decisions, we not only look at the value of NPV and IRR, we also look at if the projects are independent or mutually exclusive. If they're independent, we can look at each project's NPV and IRR to make decisions. If they're mutually exclusive, we have to compare these acceptable projects to see which one has the highest NPV or highest IRR. Okay, so we will have examples calculating these measures and make decisions. Let's first look at the first measure, the net present value, NPV. Again, it is the sum of the present value of all cash inflows and outflows of a project. NPV method assumes cash flows are reinvested at the WACC level. So R, the discount rate, equals weighted average cost of capital here. So NPV can be calculated using cash flow from cash flow 0 to cash flow n, discounted by 1 plus r to the power of 0 to the power of n. So t here could be from 0 to n. Okay, and because we're discounting the cash flow for the project, so we have to use WACC instead of cost of equity, cost of debts, or cost of preferred stock. We use the comprehensive cost for the firm here, WACC. Example, if we have cash flows for project L and S shown as below, delta cash flow is the difference between cash flow L and cash flow S. WACC is 10%. What is the NPV of each project? So here we have information on cash flows from year 0 to year 3 for project L, project low, and project S. Okay, at year 0, both projects would have the initial cost of -100. And in year 1, L has a cash income of 10, S has cash income of 70. In year 2, L has cash income of 60, S has cash income of 50. In year 3, L has cash income of 80, S has cash income of 20. Okay, if we want to calculate NPV for project L, we will have to enter cash flows into the cash flow function. Cash flow 0 as -100, cash flow 1 as 10, frequency 1 as 1, cash flow 2 as 60, frequency 2 as 1, cash flow 3 as 80, frequency 3 as 1. And we input I as 10. Okay, we press NPV button, we press I as the WACC because WACC for both projects are 10%. Okay, so we press NPV button, compute, we have 18.78 as the NPV of project L. It's positive. Okay, so if we make independent decision for project L because NPV is positive, we would accept project L. Okay, let me open the the calculator app. Okay, and show you how we can calculate this on the calculator. So we can go to the cash flow function, input cash flow 0 as -100, enter. Down button, cash flow 1 as 10, enter. Frequency 1 as 1, enter. Cash flow 2 as 60, enter. Frequency 2 as 1, enter. Cash flow 3 as 80, enter. Frequency 3 as 1, enter. Okay, double check, no cash flow 4. Come back to cash flow 0, go to NPV button, I input as 10, enter, down button, compute. Okay, we have 18.78 as our NPV for L. As for project S, we can do the same thing here. Okay, but NPV 0, cash flow 0 is still -100. Cash flow 1 changed to 70, enter. Frequency as 1 as 1. Cash flow 2, 50, enter. Frequency 2 as 1. Cash flow 3, 20, enter. Frequency 3 as 1. Okay, double check, no cash flow 4. Go to NPV, I 10, enter, down button, compute. 19.98 is the NPV value for project S. Okay, it's also positive, so we know that if we just if the two projects are independent, we would accept if NPV is larger than 0. If projects are mutually exclusive, accept projects with highest NPV because those add the most value to the firm. Okay, so if, in this example, if these two projects are mutually exclusive, because NPV S is 19.98, is larger than NPV L, 18.78, and they're both larger than 0, so we would accept only S, okay, the one with the highest NPV, if they're mutually exclusive. We would accept both projects. We would accept both S and L if they're independent from each other, because both have positive NPV. Okay, so this is how we make decisions based on NPV. What if WACC is 0%, not 5%, 10, 15, or 20%? So if we keep our cash flow inputs the same, but change WACC and compute for NPV for L or S, we can see that as WACC increases, NPV decreases. Okay. The NPV of a project whose cash flows accrue relatively rapidly, like S, will be less sensitive to changes in the discount rate WACC than the NPV of a project whose cash flows come later in its life. Okay, so you can see for project S, we have more money coming in the first year and second year, 70-50. For L, we have more money come at later times in year 2 and 3, 60-80. Okay, and when we calculate NPV, cash flow are discounted by using 1 plus WACC to the power of T. So when the money comes earlier, like S, T is smaller. Okay, so the change in WACC would have a less effect on NPV. For projects as L, because the money comes later, T is larger, so any change in WACC would have a larger impact on NPV. Okay, so for S, again, money comes earlier, T is smaller, WACC change should have a smaller impact on NPV. So you can see the range is from 5 to 40 for S. But for L, the money comes later, T is larger, so any change in WACC would have a larger impact on NPV. You can see the range is from -4 to 50. Okay, there's a larger change. IRR, internal rate of return. The discount rate that forces present value of inflows equal to the cost, and the present value is 0. Okay, so IRR method assumes cash flows are reinvested at IRR. Okay, this is the discount rate we assume that makes the discount value of all the cash flows be equal to 0. Okay, so it's similar to the NPV formula, but we set NPV as 0 here. If we discount all the cash flows using IRR, internal rate of return, we have a present value of 0. Okay, and when NPV equals 0, it means that the present value of inflows equal to the present value of the outflows or the cost. Okay, that's why we have NPV as 0. Okay, in order to calculate IRR for project L and S, we do the same. We do the same first step as how we calculate the cash NPV. So the first step is still to input, for example, it is still to input all the cash flows into the cash flow function, and then we would press IRR compute. So IRR for L and S will show up on the screen. Okay, so again, for project S, let's start with S because we have all the values saved here in cash flow function for S already. Cash flow 0 as -0, cash flow 1, 70, frequency 1 as 1, cash flow 2, 50, frequency 2 as 1, cash flow 3 as 20, frequency 3 as 1, no cash flow 4. Okay, all the cash flows are for S right now. And then instead of pressing NPV, we press IRR this time. So the calculator knows that we set NPV into 0. Okay, and we press compute. Okay, there's no need to input WACC because we use IRR as our discount rate here. Okay, so for S, our IRR is 23.56%. Okay, remember to add the percentage sign back. Okay, then we go to cash flow. We change cash flow 0 to -100, cash flow 1 to 10 for project L. Cash flow 2 should be 60. Cash flow 3 should be 80, enter. Okay, no cash flow 4. Go to IRR compute. We have 13% as our IRR for project L. Okay, so this is how we calculate NPV and IRR by using cash flow function, NPV, and IRR function, these three buttons together. Okay, now we know that LNS has 18 and 23% as their IRR, and we know WACC for the firm is still 10%. What decision should we make based on IRR? If IRR is larger than WACC, the project's return exceeds its costs, and there is some return left over to boost stockholders' returns. So if IRR is larger than WACC, we should accept the project. If IRR is smaller than WACC, we should reject the project. Okay, here we can see that both projects have a higher IRR compared to our WACC. So we should accept both of them if they're independent from each other, because both IRR is larger than WACC. However, if projects L and S are mutually exclusive, which means we can only accept one of them, we would accept S because S has a higher IRR than L. Okay, S has an IRR of 23.56. L has an IRR of 18.13. Okay, so if these two are independent, we accept both. If they're mutually exclusive, we accept the one with high IRR, which is S. Discount rate or reinvestment rate assumption summary for NPV and IRR. NPV assumes cash flows are reinvested at WACC. IRR assumes cash flows are reinvested at IRR. Assuming cash flows are reinvested at the opportunity cost of capital is more realistic. So NPV is the best. Okay, so if we compare NPV and IRR, we think NPV is a better measure than IRR because the cost of capital we use, which is WACC, is more realistic. When NPV and IRR have conflicts, we should use NPV. Okay, again, we think NPV is better than IRR because it has a more realistic discount rate. So if NPV and IRR lead us to the same decision, we don't have any worries. But if they lead to different decisions, we would go with NPV. NPV method should be used to choose between mutually exclusive projects when the method leads to different accept or rejection decisions. For example, here, if we know that NPV A is larger than NPV B is larger than 0, we would choose A based on NPV, right? Because it's higher, A has higher NPV here. And if IRR B is larger than IRR A and they're both larger than WACC, we would choose B because it has the highest IRR based on IRR. Okay, so if A and B are mutually exclusive, we would have different decisions made based on NPV or IRR. But ultimately, we would choose A. Okay, if we know all of the information here, we would go with the choice we made based on NPV because we think NPV is a better measure than IRR. Okay, we would choose A. But in some other cases, for example, in our case example here of L and S, based on IRR, we would choose S because S has a higher IRR. And based on NPV, we also choose S, okay, because S has a high NPV. So in our example for S and L, we accept S no matter we look at NPV or IRR, okay, because NPV and IRR has the same conclusion here. Okay, we will make the same choice based on them. But in another case where we have different decisions made based on NPV or IRR, we go with NPV decision.